You know, when you think about Christmas, what comes to mind? Christmas trees, sending cards, pulling crackers, that big turkey dinner, right? It all feels so timeless, like it's been around forever. But what if I told you that most of it, well, it's actually pretty new? Yeah, the Christmas we know and love today was pretty much invented in the 19th century. So let's get into it. Let's see how the Victorians took a holiday that was fading away and totally reinvented it.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start by looking at what Christmas was like before all this change. Then, we'll dig into the big reinvention, the people, the technology, all the things that created the traditions we see today. And finally, we'll tie it all together to see how that legacy is still with us.
Okay, so first things first. To really get just how massive this change was, we need to rewind the clock. Let's take a look at what Christmas was like at the beginning of the 19th century.
And honestly, it's kind of shocking. I mean, can you even imagine Christmas being unpopular? It sounds crazy, but it's true. The holiday had a really rough time. You know, after the Puritans banned it back in the 17th century for being too wild, it just never really bounced back. By the time we get to the early 1800s, it was barely a flicker of what it once was. And just look at this contrast. It is night and day. Before the Victorians, Christmas wasn't this huge cultural festival. It was a pretty minor religious day. And the celebrations, they were these rowdy, boozy parties for adults, not exactly the cozy family thing we think of. And here's the real kicker. For most people, especially those working in the new factories, you still had to go to work. It just wasn't a big deal. The holiday was really on its last legs.
But then, things started to change. As Britain dove headfirst into the Industrial Revolution, something amazing happened. The stage was set for the most incredible comeback story. Christmas didn't just survive, it was totally reborn.
And this wasn't just one thing, you know? It was like a perfect storm of social change. You had new technology, a new economy, a new culture all colliding at once. Britain was changing fast. People were moving to cities, and they were looking for new ways to connect, new traditions. Christmas was about to fill that void.
So, what exactly caused this massive shift? Well, you can really boil it down to three main things: royals, writers, and railways. These were the big catalysts of change. Let's break them down one by one.
Okay, first up, the Industrial Revolution. This just changed everything. Suddenly you have this new, booming middle class, and they have actual disposable income, money to spend on gifts, on decorations. Then you have the railways, crisscrossing the country. This was huge. It meant families that were split up by jobs could actually travel to see each other for the holidays. And, maybe most importantly, new laws like the Factory Act of 1833 meant a lot of people got Christmas Day off for the very first time. They finally had the time and the money to celebrate.
All right, next up, the original influencers, the royal family. Now, Christmas trees weren't totally new to Britain, but they were pretty obscure. That is, until this picture came out in 1848. It shows Queen Victoria, her German husband Prince Albert, and their kids around this beautifully decorated tree. Prince Albert really brought this tradition with him from Germany, and once the public saw this image, well, it just exploded. Everybody wanted a tree. This one illustration basically made the Christmas tree the symbol of a family Christmas.
And of course, you can't talk about a Victorian Christmas without talking about Charles Dickens. His book, A Christmas Carol, was an absolute sensation. Now, here's the interesting part. Dickens didn't really invent any traditions. What he did was capture and define the spirit of Christmas, this idea of it being a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. He basically wrote the instruction manual for how Christmas should feel. It was all about family, generosity, and redemption. He just bottled the mood of the time perfectly.
So you've got the social conditions, you've got the royal seal of approval, and you've got the perfect story. The foundation was set. And from there, a ton of new traditions started popping up, really building out what we think of as the modern Christmas.
Let's start with the Christmas card. You know, its origin story is actually super relatable. It was basically invented out of a need for a life hack. Back in 1843, this guy, Sir Henry Cole, was just way too busy to write all his holiday letters. So he thought, what if I just get an artist to design one card I can send to everybody? And bam! A practical little time saver turned into one of our most cherished traditions.
And boy, did it catch on. Thanks to new printing technology and super cheap postage, just a half a penny, sending cards became a massive trend. Get this, by 1880, people in Britain were sending 11.5 million Christmas cards a year. An entire industry just appeared out of nowhere.
Here's another great invention from the time, the Christmas cracker. It all started with a candy maker named Tom Smith. He was looking for a new way to sell his sweets. He saw these French candies, bonbons, wrapped in paper, and had an idea. What if he added a little strip that made a pop sound when you pulled it? Genius! He later threw in a silly joke, a little toy, and a paper hat, and the Christmas cracker as we know it was born.
And what's a Christmas cracker without the Christmas dinner, right? The Victorians are the ones who really cemented the Christmas feast as the centerpiece of the whole celebration. It was the big moment for the family to gather round.
But the menu itself went through a major transformation. For a long time, the main event was goose or maybe roast beef, but turkey started to take over. Why? Well, it was the perfect size for one of those new middle-class families. And you know, mince pies, believe it or not, they used to have actual meat in them. The Victorians are the ones who turned them into the sweet, fruity desserts we eat today.
And what about the big guy himself, Santa Claus? Well, our modern version of Santa is basically a Victorian-era mashup. You have the original St. Nicholas, this kind bishop from the 4th century, you have the Dutch figure Sinterklaas, and you had the Old English Father Christmas, who was more about feasting than gifts. Over time, especially with help from American writers and illustrators, all these different figures kind of blended together into the jolly, red-suited, gift-giving Santa we all know.
So, when you start putting all these pieces of the puzzle together, it becomes incredibly clear. The Christmas we celebrate is, in so many ways, a direct gift from the Victorians.
I mean, just think about it for a second. The decorated tree sitting in your living room? Victorian. Sending out Christmas cards to everyone you know? Victorian. Having turkey for Christmas dinner? Victorian. Pulling those crackers and wearing the paper hats? Yep, Victorian. Even our image of Santa Claus, it was all solidified in that era. It's their blueprint.
So really, here's the bottom line. The Victorians didn't just rescue Christmas from fading away. They completely remade it in their own image. They took this old, kind of rowdy public festival and transformed it into a holiday that was all about family, about charity, about home. And those values, they really struck a chord in their fast-changing world, and they've been at the heart of Christmas ever since.
And that kind of leaves us with one final question to think about, right? The Victorians shaped Christmas to fit their world of factories and railways. So here we are in our own age of the internet and social media. It really makes you wonder, what are our contributions to Christmas? What traditions are we starting right now that people 100 years from now will be looking back on?